In today's video, we're going to talk about the new end of match procedures, and I also want to address if random burn cards might end up seeing some metagame play this weekend at YCS New Jersey, specifically because of this new end time procedure. And if you don't know what that means, basically at Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments, the larger ones and even the smaller ones are supposed to have a time limit per round. And the reason that this is in place is because no one has all day, infinite time to play Yu-Gi-Oh, and they like to at least try to keep it restrained to just one day for like a regional qualifier and not have it go at like 3 in the morning or something crazy like that. And the way they do this is that they have 40-minute timers for every single round, and previously where there was a end of match procedure that basically went like this. So let's say you go to a regional qualifier and the time in round is called "It's Your Turn." So your turn right there is turn 0 because it's already sort of halfway through. It's not a full turn. After that, then you and your opponent would play 5 turns. So if you were turn 0, your opponent would be turn 1, you would be turn 2, so on and so forth. And at the end of turn 5, whoever had the most life points would then win that game. Now, because rounds are 40 minutes, very often when you would go into time, you'd actually be in game 3, which meant whoever had the most life points at the end of those 5 turns would win the match. And if you didn't have the difference in life points, then it would be a draw. And that's sort of how it's gone for pretty much the entirety of Yu-Gi-Oh since I can remember, at least. And basically what happened 2 weeks ago is this got all thrown out the window. Now we're doing a completely different style of end of match procedures, and a lot of people are really pissed about it, including myself. So what are the new end of match procedures? Well, I'm sure you've already heard of them from some other people that gave sort of knee-jerk reactions to it, but I've wanted to take a couple weeks here to actually sit down and digest what these changes mean. And also I thought about them a lot as I was at the Rosemont Regional Qualifier this past weekend and kind of looked at people going into time and asked myself, how would this have been different if these new procedures were in effect? So what do these do? Well, they say now, when the time and round is called, continue with the current phase of the game. Once the phase is over, stop the game. Now that is a huge difference. So what this is saying is that if time and round is called while you are in your draw phase, well, tough luck, that's the end of that game, no matter what else is going on. In a similar way, if it's the main phase and you're setting up a huge board to OTK your opponent and time and round is called, even though you have game on board, you still can't go to the battle phase. The phase just ends right there. The game just ends right there, and that's going to speed things up a lot. Now, why do I think they did this change? Well, you know, I support Konami in a lot of things that other YouTubers might not support them on. I haven't complained too much about their practices and their changes with the game because I know changes can be pretty scary, and I know that once they actually end up happening, sometimes they don't end up making as big of a difference as we thought they would. But I think that this change in particular is so clearly designed only to benefit the people that are not playing in the tournament. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the only two camps of people that I've ever seen support this rule change fall into 2 categories. So judges and staff love this change. The reason being is that it's a really, really long day. If you're a judge, you have to arrive early, you have to leave last, and it's draining work. And my heart goes out to the judges out there. It's a really thankless job, and this is definitely a really good change for judges and staff. As someone who has been on the feature match team for YCSs, I know what it's like to work those really long days, and yeah, this change will make a significant impact on the duration of tournaments, especially those one-day events like regional qualifiers. So judges and staff have so far shown full support for this. The other camp that I've seen say that this isn't that bad are the people that don't play in tournaments. I see this from a lot of YouTubers that haven't been to a regional in years, and they're saying, oh, this isn't that big a deal. It's just gonna combat sort of slow play, and the only people that I see saying that are the people that don't go to tournaments, because this isn't gonna affect them. And I think in both those cases, I don't know if I agree with their standpoint. The reason being is that this change really takes control out of the players. Not every match will go into time. I think on average, when I go to a regional, I go into time about twice, maybe 3 times throughout the tournament, which isn't that much. It's about a third or a quarter of my rounds, and that's not too much, but it definitely does make an impact. If those games would have been won if I played 5 more turns, that can make an impact now if I'm just going to lose them immediately. This has a huge impact on the game, and I think that ignoring that would be pretty crazy. But like I said, I think this was made directly to benefit Konami staff and volunteers as far as the judges go, and it takes all the control out of the player. And I know some people say, well, you can just play faster now, and I think that's interesting. That's sort of like the intended result here. I made a tweet about it that some people noticed where I said that this is very much like doing a math problem in the wrong way and getting the right answer. And what I mean by that in this context is that I think this is a terrible way to speed up tournaments. However, it will speed up tournaments, and that's kind of what they were going for. It's kind of like, I've said this a few times to people, it's kind of like they made the end of round procedure so bad that it encourages you to play as fast as humanly possible just to not go into time, so you don't have to play with this horrible system. And even though this will speed things up, I don't know if it'll make it any easier for judges, and the reason being, it now matters the exact second that time is called in round, and that's going to create a ton of issues. Actually, at the recent regional qualifier that I played in, there wasn't a clock anywhere, and that regional, that location never has a clock. And basically what they did is they had the head judge announce every 10 minutes, and then at the last 5 minutes when you were about to go into time, and that simply doesn't work anymore. You can't have a system like that because it matters the exact second that we go into time. And to be completely honest, and this is being recorded before YCS New Jersey, I don't think this will last. I actually think that the way that they should have done this is they should have done at least the end of the turn, but I think really they should have just changed it from 5 turns to 3 turns like they do at local tournaments, or even just give both players 1 extra turn. That would have sped it up significantly without creating so much backlash and so many ruling issues. Like, this is just awful. Imagine like setting up a huge board, there's 1 second away from time, and you're about to say enter battle phase, and your opponent goes, wait a second, I have a response. And if they have a card they can activate, even if it's something that's inconsequential, they're technically allowed to do that and stall out to go to your main phase instead of you switching to your battle phase, and that's going to create a lot of salty situations where you definitely would have won. And man, this change is just so bad. It's so confusing. They should not make a change like this where it matters the exact second that time is called, because even now you have ruling issues because you don't really want to be turn 0, because whoever's turn 0 doesn't get the last turn. The turn 1 person gets the last turn, which means that you really want to pass to your opponent before time is called so that their turn 0. And in the past, that's caused issues where someone is saying pass turn and time is called, and the other person is saying, well, I haven't started my turn yet. And now this is going to become way worse because, yeah, like I said, entering the battle phase from the main phase, your opponent can simply say, oh, I have a response, and then you have to wait a second for them to respond, and then time is called and you can't go in the battle phase. Now, does this mean people will play burn cards? I actually think it does. I think the biggest burn card that people will play is Gaga Cowboy, a card that saw play for a really long time but eventually fell out of competition. I think in these new end of match procedures, that is an incredible card to play because I think in most cases the time will be called when there is someone in the main phase, and that's the best time to make Gaga Cowboy. It's actually the only time to make Gaga Cowboy pretty much, outside of crazy card effects like you exceed someone in the battle phase. But in general, the time to make Gaga Cowboy, the time to do the most possible plays is going to be the main phase, and I think that's why that card will see play. Now, could other cards see play? Well, certainly. I think cards like Magic Cylinder, Mystic Wook, which is sort of the opposite, or Wok, I have no idea how to pronounce that, I'm so sorry. I think that card isn't that crazy. I know that like Rainbow Life is banned in a lot of OCG tournaments, which is kind of funny. That card isn't allowed at the World Championship, and that's pretty crazy, but that card is cited as sort of an anti-time card in the OCG a lot of times. They didn't really happen in the TCG, but I think these cards like Blazing Mirror Force, cards like Emergency Provisions, anything that can potentially increase your life points or decrease your opponent's life points without a lot of interaction, I think could actually end up seeing play under this new ruling. And man, there are just so many frustrating situations. I think one that is potentially going to ruin a whole bunch of matches is that Trickstar players can simply, and I know that, okay, I do want to address slow playing is not allowed. Slow playing is cheating, and you will get game loss for that, or at least a warning for that. The problem is that if you are advancing the game state, if you're making plays, even if it's just for the sake of making plays, as long as you have plays you're making and playing at a consistent rate, you really can't get called for slow play. And this is the problem. Imagine playing against a Trickstar player who is just kind of doing their thing. They're playing some search cards. Maybe they're shuffling a little slow, and you call a judge over and say, "Judge, my opponent is slow playing." Well, first off, calling the judge over takes time, and you don't get a time extension for judge calls unless they think that it's going to be a couple minutes. But if you raise your hand and call a judge, well, the time that takes them to walk over to you, the 30 seconds or whatever, sometimes even longer than that, you don't get those seconds back. And then you say, okay, I think my opponent's slow playing. He's playing, he's shuffling a little slower, he's searching a little slower, and then it doesn't really matter because at that point, the time is almost called in the round. He summons Trickstar Lycoris and passes turn. As soon as time is called, you draw a card, take a couple hundred points of damage, and that's game. Those situations are going to be all over the place, and it's just a mess. This is going to be horrible. I know that a lot of people are going to say, well, just play faster, but I think that what's going to happen is that people are really going to be sharking their opponents on slow playing, and I don't think there's anything wrong with calling a judge for someone that is actually slow playing, but people are just going to be like, man, if you haven't made a play in like 3 seconds, they're going to call a judge. And decks nowadays, the game states nowadays are pretty complicated, and sometimes you need a couple seconds to actually think about what you're doing, and it's going to be really difficult to tell if your opponent is genuinely sort of thinking about their play or if they're just trying to stall for time. And there's just going to be so many slow play infractions, either warranted or unwarranted, that I think this is just going to be horrible. I just think in general, I know that they were trying to speed up how tournaments went, and that probably will happen. We might even see sort of like all of day one be just all the Swiss rounds in a YCS, because they're going to gain so much time from the tournament being so much faster, and that might happen, and that might be kind of cool, so you don't have to come back for the last 2 rounds of Swiss in the morning on Sunday. But I think overall this change is not very good, and I think that once again, the only people that I've seen defend this change pretty much have been staff, judges, and people that don't actually participate in the tournaments that this affects. And I don't really think those people are, well, maybe the judges can make some sort of claims. I know, like I said, it's a thankless job, it's long hours, it's not a ton of pay, and I think that maybe they can say something, but they're not the ones. A judge doesn't get bonus money or bonus packs depending on how well they do in the judging tournament experience, but the players do, and I think that this is really just taking all the control away from the players, and I'm not very happy with it, and I think that a lot of other people are not happy as well. But let me know what your thoughts about this change are. Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? Do you think it's just not going to make a huge difference? And also, do you think that they are going to revert this change? And if so, how long do you think it will take for them to do that? It's really scary as a company, even when you make a change that not everyone likes. If you immediately go back on it, then you sort of lay this precedent down where if people complain enough, you'll revert on your decision making. And I think the time that we saw this happen, where Konami really stuck to their guns, even though people complained about it, it used to be that when you got to the top 16 of a YCS, you suddenly played battle packs for the rest of Top Cut, and that led to a lot of backlash. And while they did eventually change that, they had to stick with it for over a year, only because once you make that decision, you can't just immediately go back on it every single time someone complains, because people are always going to complain. But I think in this case, after YCS New Jersey, I really do expect them to change this from phase to at least end of turn, so there's not so much confusion. But let me know what your thoughts are. I'll end the video here. Thank you so much for watching. See you later. Goodbye.